The Rules Committee will come to order. We have never had a hearing like this one before. That's for two reasons. The first reason is that we have never had a member like this before. She has encouraged violence against members of this institution, going so far as agreeing with a comment that advocated for putting a bullet in the head of the Speaker of the House of Representatives. That was part of a larger pattern of endorsing violence. This is truly sick stuff. Congresswoman Green has also promoted truly appalling things, from implying that 9/11 is a hoax, saying school shootings were false flag operations, and spreading anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, including one about a Jewish space laser being the cause of wildfires in California. I mean, this is unbelievable. The second reason is that the full Congress has never had to take this step. When something like this has happened in the past, leadership on both sides always did the right thing. That was the case with former Democratic Congressman Bill Jefferson and with former Republican Congressman Steve King. Both were stripped of their committees at the direction of their party's leadership. But when it comes to Congresswoman Green, Republican leader Kevin McCarthy is unwilling or unable to do the right thing. This is not a close call. Serving on a committee is not a right, it is a privilege. When a member talks about school shootings being false flag operations, they should lose the privilege of serving on the Education and Labor Committee. Parkland was one of the deadliest school shootings in our nation's history. In Sandy Hook, 26 people were killed, including 20 children as young as 6 years old. And we've all met with the parents of Parkland and Sandy Hook, whose loved ones were killed in those shootings. I mean, it's been heartbreaking to see what these parents and these families have had to endure. We've all met with them. We all know the pain and the anguish that they have had to deal with. And when a person encourages when a person encourages talk about shooting a member in the head, they should lose the right to serve on any committee. That shouldn't be a radical idea. The action that we are taking here today isn't about partisanship. It is not about canceling anybody with a different political belief. It is about accountability and about upholding the integrity and the decency of this institution. Now, if this isn't the bottom line, I don't know where the hell the bottom line is. None of us get to decide for the voters who they send to Congress. But as members of this body and as leaders of this country, it is our responsibility to set standards of conduct for those we serve with. That is especially important when somebody crosses the line into violence. Removing Congressman Jefferson and Congressman King from committees was the right thing to do then. Removing Congresswoman Green is the right thing to do now. And I regret that we are going to have to do it through the Rules Committee rather than the party leadership level. Nonetheless, we are going to do this. And let's be clear, this is not a debate about a difference in policy or even ideology. It is about what she said. It quite frankly diminishes not only her office, but this entire institution. And we must act. There must be accountability. I don't think this is, I hope very strongly that this is not going to be a partisan exercise. I hope and I so desire that this is going to be a bipartisan effort. That is my hope. And what a refreshing statement that would be if Democrats and Republicans can come together in a bipartisan way to join with one voice on this issue. So before we hear our witnesses, let me turn to our ranking member, Mr. Cole, for any remarks he wishes to make.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Today's hearing is on House Resolution 72, a resolution removing Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene from her assignments on the Budget Committee and the Education and Labor Committee. I want to be very clear at the outset that I find Congresswoman Greene's comments deeply offensive, using vile anti-Semitic slurs, degrading those with special needs, endorsing violence against political leaders, and further victimizing those who've suffered unimaginable trauma is absolutely repugnant and is unbecoming of any member of Congress. However, the action the majority is taking today raises questions that have nothing to do with Congresswoman Green, but concern the institution as a whole, which is why I feel that this hearing is premature and should instead first be adjudicated by the Ethics Committee. Proceeding down the current path establishes a new standard, not only for what members of Congress say before they are elected, but also what rights the majority party has to dictate the committee assignments of the minority members. Throughout the history of this institution, the majority and minority have respected the right of each side to assign their members to committees. And it's also been the responsibility of each side to hold their members accountable for unacceptable behavior. In my opinion, there have been plenty of instances of members of the current majority party using intemperate language or taking controversial actions. Actions, I will add, that went unchecked by Democratic leadership. As was then and is now, if one side feels that the other is not taking the appropriate corrective or punitive action, the Bipartisan Ethics Committee exists to adjudicate matters related to the official code of conduct. This would certainly be an appropriate course of action in this case. The Ethics Committee should review the matter in question, determine if a new standard relating to actions taken by a member of Congress before they are elected should be covered by the Code of Conduct, and make the appropriate recommendations. Doing anything different would risk sending the institution down a precarious path, and the end of which we cannot predict. So I would strongly urge this committee to consider an alternative course of action before it's too late. Let me just add this, if I may, Mr. Chairman, on a personal note. I've sat on Republican steering committee, for many years. I've had to make these tough decisions about removing members from their committee. Haven't hesitated to do that. I think that's a function that goes with those jobs. I do worry a lot about the precedent of another party choosing to do it. This is early in the session. There are genuine questions to be raised here. And in my view, we ought to follow a process that will allow us in a deliberative way to establish the facts, to discuss the implications, and move from there. So I don't want you to take my statement as suggesting that I don't think action is appropriate. I just think the appropriate action is for the Ethics Commission to look at this, and that's how we should proceed. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for his comments. And let me just say for the record that when Steve King was denied his committee assignments, the Ethics Committee had no role in it. The leadership, the Republican leadership, decided that that was the right thing to do. It took them a while to get to the right decision, but that was they took action, and I think we all appreciate that. When when Congressman Jefferson was removed, again, it wasn't because of an Ethics Committee recommendation. It was because the Democratic leadership said that he should be stripped of his committees. So, I mean, and the other thing is, this could have been brought to the floor under a privileged resolution, and there would be no opportunity here for a discussion beforehand. But let me just also make the point that this is not the issue. Is the issue is what she has said, and yet some of the things have been before she was sworn in as a member of Congress. But here's the thing. I mean, she's doubled down on it. She's fundraising off of this stuff as we speak. She tweeted, "I won't back down and I will never apologize," for all these things. And look, in terms of precedent, if the precedent's going to be that if somebody advocates putting a bullet in the head of a member of Congress, and if that is going to be the new determination as to what it takes to throw people off of committees, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. And I know the gentleman in his statement is not condoning what she has said, and because I have great respect for the gentleman from Oklahoma. He's an incredible member of this institution. But as I said, if this is not the bottom, I don't know what the hell is. And so I appreciate it. And I want to welcome our two distinguished panelists for the first panel. First, Chairman Deutsch and Ranking Member Walorski. We are happy that you are here. Without objection, any written materials you submit to rules.documents@mail.house.gov before the conclusion of this hearing will be entered into the record. I now recognize the distinguished gentleman from Florida, Mr. Deutsch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the ranking member, Ranking Member Wolarski, distinguished members of this committee. I'm sorry that we're here today. I think it's fitting to start there because it is the refusal to apologize, the refusal to show basic human decency, and the refusal to uphold the reputation of this House that brings us together this afternoon. We're also here today because Republican leadership rewarded that behavior with seats on 2 House committees. House Resolution 72 seeks to remove Representative Green of Georgia from her positions on the Committee on the Budget and the Committee on Education and Labor. I thank Representative Washington Schultz for her leadership on this important resolution. The resolution was referred to the Committee on Ethics, but I am appearing before you today not only as a chair of that committee, but also as the representative of Parkland, Florida. Prior to her election, Representative Green engaged in a long pattern of threatening and dangerous conduct against the survivors of the shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School almost 3 years ago to the day, February 14th, 2018. She called mass shootings in Parkland, in Las Vegas, and in Newtown staged false flag events. She called survivors crisis actors. It is important for this committee to remember why Ms. Green's conduct is so harmful and so very, very dangerous. Ms. Green peddles conspiracy theories that radicalize people online. These theories aren't just deluded, they also advocate violence. They promote harassment, they dehumanize and devalue large swaths of our population based on race and on faith. Last year, FBI Director Wray testified that conspiracy theories like the ones Ms. Green promotes are among the most serious threats to American security. Ms. Green is now a member of Congress, one who has publicly spouted racist, anti-Semitic, Islamophobic garbage, has harassed survivors of mass shootings, denied their very occurrence. Now, I have cried with the families of Parkland, and I've grieved with them. And in my wallet, I still, to this day, carry a sheet of paper with the names of their loved ones so that they're never forgotten in Congress. So, and Mr. Chairman, as we have this conversation, you're right, you've met families. We've all met the families. I just want to be clear, I'm here today in part because Alyssa Olideff and Scott Beagle and Martin Duque and Nick Dorette and Aaron Feiss and Jamie Guttenberg and Chris Hickson and Luke Hoyer and Carl Lochran and Gina Montalto and Joaquin Oliver and Elena Petty and Meadow Pollack and Helena Ramsey and Alex Schachter and Carmen Chentrup and Peter Wang cannot be. The families are still grieving, as are the communities of Sandy Hook and Las Vegas and too many more to name. There are not words in the English language to properly describe how the remarks of Ms. Green makes these communities feel. They are still suffering. They will suffer forever. And this makes it so much worse. Ms. Green does not accept the responsibility for her actions, spreading these dangerous lies. If anything, she seems to be emboldened and has promised that she'll never apologize. She's not apologized for amplifying a call for that summary execution of the Speaker of the House. When promoting a rally in Washington, D.C., she called for a takeover of the Capitol with violence if necessary. She said that Congress is nothing and they should fear us. They should be cowering in fear. She told her followers to flood the Capitol, flood all of the government buildings, go inside. These are public buildings. We own them. Now look at where we are 1 month removed from a deadly insurrection. What have Republican leaders said in response to these comments as Ms. Green joined their ranks? Not enough. Finally, this week, the Senate leader, Leader McConnell, decried Ms. Green's what he referred to as loony lies and conspiracy theories. And he described her as a cancer for the Republican Party and the country. But in the House, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Ranking Member, Ms. Green was rewarded with seats on both the Education and Labor Committee and the Budget Committee. The Republican leadership isn't holding her accountable for her abhorrent statements and incitement. They're sending a signal that they will tolerate this conduct. That's why we're here today, because Minority Leader McCarthy refuses to do the right thing and remove Ms. Green from these committee assignments that give her a platform. House Resolution 72 is an unfortunate, but utterly necessary measure. One of our most basic individual obligations is to uphold the public's trust in democratic institutions, including this very body where we work. It would be impossible to maintain civic confidence in the integrity of the House if we were to normalize Ms. Green's behavior. We must affirm that this type of behavior is not now, will not be tomorrow, and will never be tolerated in the United States Congress. That is why I support House Resolution 72. Now yield back.
Thank you very much. I'm now happy to yield the floor to my friend from Indiana, the ranking member of the Ethics Committee, Ms. Walorski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman McGovern, Ranking Member Cole, and members of the Rules Committee. I appear before the committee today as the ranking member of the House Ethics Committee, a position I was appointed to just 2 weeks ago. In fact, this is the first time Chairman Deutsch and I have even seen each other, even virtually, since my appointment. This is my second term serving on the Ethics Committee, and I was looking forward to working with Chairman Deutsch in a collegial and bipartisan manner. But here we are, managing a contentious, politically driven resolution that was assigned to our committee and will now be on the House floor without proper consideration by the Ethics Committee. What are we doing, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Deutsch? First, let me say that many Republicans have denounced statements made by Representative Green before she became a member of Congress, and I do the same as I appear in front of you today. Republican House leadership said months ago that Representative Green's comments are appalling, and he had no tolerance for them, neither do I, and I have a statement on the record as well. I associate myself with my leadership statements, and I know many of my colleagues have and do as well. I am not here to defend Representative Green. I'm here to defend the process of the House, and within this House, the integrity of the Ethics Committee and the functions of the majority and minority parties. The Committee on Ethics is unique. The committee rules, in fact, recognize the importance of the unique way this committee functions. I would like to read directly from the committee rule book. From the foreword on page 1. The Committee on Ethics is unique in the House of Representatives, consistent with the duty to carry out its advisory and enforcement responsibilities in an impartial manner. The committee is the only standing committee of the House of Representatives, the membership of which is divided evenly by party. These rules are intended to provide a fair procedural framework for the conduct of the committee's activities to help ensure that the committee serves well the people of the United States, the House of Representatives, and the members, officers, and employees of the House of Representatives. The committee works best in a collegial and bipartisan manner. In fact, during the 113th, 114th, 115th, and 116th Congresses, all votes taken in the investigative subcommittees were unanimous. The Republicans and Democrats serving on these subcommittees were in agreement. All of the work of the committee, completed by its sitting members, the members who are asked to serve in the investigative subcommittees, and the committee's professional and nonpartisan staff, all of the work is accomplished by bipartisan cooperation. And the work of the Ethics Committee is extensive. In the 116th Congress alone, the committee commenced or continued investigative fact gatherings regarding 50 separate investigative matters, impaneled 6 investigative subcommittees, held 32 investigative subcommittee meetings, filed 5 reports with the House totaling over 3,300 pages regarding various investigative matters, publicly addressing 16 matters, resolved 24 additional matters, conducted 110 voluntary witness interviews, and reviewed over 420,000 pages of documents. And you can see why I was excited to serve with you, Chairman Deutsch. Each of these tasks was agreed to by the chair and the ranking member of the committee. The committee operates effectively because it's a consensus-driven committee with decisions made jointly by the chair and the ranking member. But as to Representative Green, the current chair and ranking member have not received a complaint and determined whether the information meets the requirements of the committee rules. The chair and the ranking member have not jointly gathered information concerning this alleged conduct. The chair and the ranking member have not had a single conversation regarding Representative Green. This committee has not even had its first organizing meeting for the 117th Congress. But yet the chair seeks to bring this matter before the House without proper committee consideration and jurisdiction and without due process. I believe it's worth noting that the majority did not have to refer this resolution to the Ethics Committee. The majority could have brought this matter directly to the floor through a privileged question, but instead it chose to violate the one thing that's working in this place, the collegial bipartisan manner by which the Ethics Committee could operate and has always operated with massive, major accomplishments and success. The Committee on Ethics has not exercised its jurisdiction over statements made by a member of Congress that were not otherwise unlawful before they were sworn into office. The Ethics Committee has sole jurisdiction over the interpretation of the Code of Official Conduct, which governs members of Congress, officers, and employees. But the statements that I have seen publicly were made before Ms. Green was a candidate or before she was sworn in as a member of Congress on January 3rd. Most, if not all, of the statements were made in 2018 and 2019 when Ms. Green was a regular citizen of the United States. The timing of the statements does not make them right, but the timing of the statements does put them outside the Ethics Committee's jurisdiction. The nonpartisan professional staff of the committee has provided, and the chair is aware that I intended to share this opinion today, that, quote, a review of public committee reports will indicate that the committee has not asserted jurisdiction over matters occurring prior to service in Congress where the conduct was unrelated to a campaign for the House and/or occurred prior to an individual's candidacy for the House. And also, quote, committee staff is not aware of any instance in which the committee has disciplined a member for or initiated an investigation into conduct that occurred prior to a member's qualification as a candidate for election to the House or was unrelated to the member's successful campaign to the House. Nor is committee staff aware of any instance in which the committee has disciplined a member or initiated an investigation solely into statements that a member made prior to swearing in that are not otherwise unlawful. If the Ethics Committee is to review its jurisdiction over statements made by members of Congress on both sides of the aisle before they're sworn in, then the matter could come before the committee in a way that complies with committee rules and preserves the bipartisan collegiality intended. It should not come to the Ethics Committee in this unprecedented manner. It's not the function of the majority party to make this determination unilaterally. It is unprecedented for the majority party to take action to remove a minority member from his or her committee assignments for any reason. Again, let me be clear. I'm not here defending Representative Green. I'm here to defend a process with phenomenal members on both sides, led by incredible chairmen, has worked for decades in this institution. And if there was ever a time to pull this country together and to handle something and model something that works, here we are. I'm here to defend these processes. the functions of the majority and minority parties. House Resolution 72 is unprecedented. I agree with Ranking Member Cole's statement that history has shown respect for the right of each side of the aisle to assign their own members to the committees they chose and to hold their members accountable for their behavior. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your time today. I yield back.
I thank the gentlewoman for her testimony. And let me again say for the record that it has not been the practice, nor is it expected, nor is it in the rules that to remove somebody from a committee should be going through the ethics committee. I mean, Steve King, who the Republicans belatedly removed because of his statements on embracing white supremacist ideas, did not go through the ethics committee. It's not a recommendation of the ethics committee. I gave you another example of Congressman Jefferson. That was his removal from the committee was not as a result of the ethics committee. So we have that. That's the precedent. Okay, we're here today because, to be honest with you, the Republican leadership hasn't dealt with this, and it's unclear whether they're able to deal with it based on internal political strife. But let me ask Mr. Deutsch and Ms. Walensky a question here. Is the ethics committee constituted? I mean, do we have all the Democratic members and the Republican members? Do we even have an ethics committee ready to go?
No, Mr. Chairman, first of all, the answer to that is no. We don't have a full complement of members because the Republican members have not all been named, so we've not yet been constituted. It's hard to argue. I just want to, if I could, since a lot of this was addressed to me, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to clarify a few things. It's hard to argue that the committee doesn't have jurisdiction, but this should nevertheless go before the committee. But we can talk, and I want to clear a few things up, but then I want to talk just for a second about really the heart of the matter. Article 1, Section 5 of the Constitution vests the House with independent authority, independent of the House Ethics Committee, to discipline any of its members for disorderly behavior, for which the appropriate sanction may include the limitation of any right, power, privilege, or immunity of that member. There is no doubt, based on the language of the Constitution, that the House is well within its right to impose this sanction. But I want to just be clear. We wouldn't be here in this position today, and that's where I started. I'm sorry that we're here. I'm sorry, Ranking Member Walensky, that this is the first occasion that we've had to be together in a formal way like this. But we wouldn't be here if Representative Green had not been seemingly, and it is all, and I appreciate your and the ranking member's words about how awful these statements are and these actions are. But we wouldn't be here if Republican leadership hadn't rewarded Representative Green with seats on the Budget Committee, the Education and Labor Committee, despite her behavior, despite her actions. We wouldn't be here if Leader McCarthy had been responsive to what I am quite confident in describing as the nation's collective outrage at Representative Green's behavior. I wonder if I can, Mr. Chairman, just submit for the record a letter from Sandy Hook Promise from Mark Barden and Nicole Hockley. Mark Barden is Daniel's father. Daniel was killed at Sandy Hook. Nicole Hockley, Dylan's mom, and they say in their letter, we have dedicated our lives since the murder of our sons to stopping school shootings and preventing more families from feeling the devastating loss we must endure every day. Representative Green has fueled conspiracy theories and supporters that claim that the Sandy Hook shooting and other violent murders of children never happened. These vicious lies deny the deaths of our murdered children and bring death threats and constant harassment to our doors and our surviving children. Mr. Chairman, this is not, we can't hide behind process arguments which on the merits aren't accurate anyway. This is about language and action that attacks the memory of those who have been killed by gun violence. It is anti-Semitic, it is racist, it is Islamophobic. And to say that we should just simply spend time thinking about whether everything that we know that's been said is offensive enough to warrant action is just, it's not a creditable approach to this whole issue. Let me just say one last thing on this, because you talked about at the ethics committee, the role of the ethics committee, Mr. Chairman, and I take this as seriously as any member of the House, and I know that Ranking Member Wolarski does as well. The role of the ethics committee is to uphold the integrity of the House. When this new member, after this whole litany of words and actions and threats, was rewarded with membership on these two committees, that has done damage to the integrity of the House. The Constitution gives us the right to take this action. It is appropriate for us to take this action. And sadly, it is necessary for us to take this action because no other action to respond to this has been taken by the leadership.
Ms. Wolarski, you wanted to respond? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you have to unmute. Unmute. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to finish up the response to you. Just to remind you, there were other ways to get this to the floor. It's the majority that decided to assign this to ethics, then bypass the committee and bring it to the floor. You guys could have brought it as a privileged question. You could have brought it right to the floor. I'm not arguing. I'm not sitting here arguing about the merits of the case and what you're seeking to do.
Yeah.
I just simply want to say about an institution that's been working, because you guys chose this way, assigning it to the ethics committee and then bypassing it.
Yeah.
And bringing it right down, we're going to destroy what kind of integrity the chairman's been talking about, and even member-to-member trust politically.
Yeah.
This could be a power grab perceived by American people. I think it's a power grab, consolidation of power. That's why I'm concerned, because you chose to do it this way. You had other options.
But, and I have nothing but the highest respect for my friend from Indiana, who we work together on a lot of issues. But I have to tell you, I'm a little baffled by your argument just now, because what you're basically saying is that, yeah, we could have gone a different way and had less of a process. If we had gone the route of the privilege resolution, you would not have this opportunity to present your points of view like you're doing right now. So I'm a little bit baffled by that. You had asked earlier, what are we doing today, and what we're doing and why we're here today. We're here today because of what the gentlewoman from Georgia has said, what she has posted. I mean, it is clear. It's on her social media. I mean, Holocaust deniers, that she has given them oxygen. I mean, it's really beyond the pale. The gentleman from Florida talked about the outrageous claims regarding the shootings in Parkland and in Sandy Hook. But let me remind you again of her statements endorsing violence, the assassination of our colleagues. And so, look, we're doing our job here because part of what we're doing here is we're upholding the integrity and the decency of this institution. And, you had asked, this is a political process. I'm trying to figure that out because, the gentleman from Oklahoma said he condemns the statements. You said that you don't want to be affiliated with those statements. I've said it, Mr. Deutsch has said it, you're going to hear others say it. So we're all, at least here, in agreement that this is beyond the pale. So I don't understand, the only reason why we're here is because my friends have decided not to do anything. And I guess you could say, well, let's check it, let's put it in the ethics committee, which it hasn't been constituted yet, which Republicans haven't appointed their members yet. We can kick the can down the road, and maybe in a few weeks or maybe a few months, everybody will forget about it. But here's the thing, and I'll end with this, and I'll yield to Mr. Cole. But, what I worry about is, what does it say if we do nothing? What does it say if we just, put our hands up in the air and say, well, this is just, outrageous statements, and we should move on to do something else. I'll tell you, What an awful message to send to this country during this very difficult time. And we just all lived through a terrible episode on January 6th when violence occurred in this chamber. And to have people in our midst advocating for violence, advocating for assassinations, and to not respond to that. And I think what we're doing here, quite frankly, is the minimum we should be doing. I personally think she should resign. I don't think she's fit to serve in this institution, but this is the minimum. Like I said at the end of my opening statement, I would like to think we could have a bipartisan vote on this. Because I think if we did, boy, that talk about bringing the country together, that would send a message. Anyway, I appreciate both of the witnesses here. I'm happy to now yield to my good friend from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just some housekeeping business first, if I may. I asked unanimous consent to submit for the record a statement from Mr. Biggs of Arizona in support of Mr. Babin's amendment to H. Resolution 72.
Without objection.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick couple of points. Let me ask you, Ms. Walorski, and then certainly would ask you as well, Mr. Chairman. But when this was referred to the Ethics Committee, did you expect the Ethics Committee would actually take it up?
Never.
And why is that?
My understanding of being a member of the Ethics Committee is this is outside of our jurisdiction. And I guess when somebody says we're going to refer this to the Ethics Committee, then it's kind of like, okay, well, we have to have a complaint. We have to go through the process that I just went through here. We have an investigation. The chairman and I talk about it and, make a decision as the chairman and the ranking member. None of that had happened.
Could the gentlelady suspend for 1 second? Could everybody who's not speaking make sure they press their mute button so we can hear Ms. Walorski clearly? Thank you.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, I'd give you a chance to respond to that.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Cole. I'm really at a loss, because if the argument is that this never would come before the Ethics Committee, and yet at the same time the argument is that this should have gone to the Ethics Committee, then you're creating this loop, which means only one thing: that there would never be accountability. Never be accountability. And just, if I may, just Mr. Ranking Member, in April of 2018, a Facebook commenter asked our colleague, now do we get to hang them? Meaning H and O, referring to Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, to which she responded, stage is being set, players are being put in place, we must be patient, this must be done perfectly or liberal judges will let them off. And then she created a petition to impeach Speaker Pelosi and said it's a crime punishable by death is what treason is. Nancy Pelosi is guilty of treason. Mr. Cole, I could go on and on. But if the argument is that we need to have a process, but then the conclusion is that that process would provide no accountability, that is exactly why we're here. That is why we must be here.
That's not, with all due respect, that's not an argument I've made. I think process is important, but we'll reserve and see what happens on that. Last point. We're not recommending doing nothing. That's not what I suggested. That's not what anybody has suggested. We do think we're on unusual ground in applying the code of conduct to conduct before somebody was here. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do that, by the way. That doesn't mean that's not worth thinking about, because I do think these remarks are extraordinarily disturbing, and they are worthy of being considered. All I'm saying is I would like some process to do that. And again, it seemed to me that the Ethics Committee was the appropriate place to do it. You have an excellent record as a chairman of bringing people together to make difficult decisions. Ms. Walorski has been a member of that committee and has been part of that process. That's the point I'm making. I'm not, don't misunderstand what I'm saying to defend the indefensible, because I think these comments are indefensible. I just think there's a different and better way to proceed here, and that's the subject of my remarks. So I know my friend would understand that, but I just wanted to be clear for the record. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Yeah, thank you very much. And again, I mean, we can go down these rabbit holes of process, but when we have done this in the past, it has not been as a result of an ethics committee deliberation. And so at this point, I'd like to yield to the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Torres.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've had the honor of serving in Congress for 6 years now. In that time, I have developed wonderful friendships with Democrats and Republicans. For example, every time Representative Virginia Foxx testifies before this committee, I try to remind her how much I value our friendship despite our policy differences. It is also beneath me to not apologize when I am wrong. That's because this is the people's house. The American people expect us to work together, to get along, and try to address the challenges they face every single day. The American people, our constituents, expect their leaders to be grounded in basic facts and to have a basic level of human decency. And while I hold most of my colleagues in great esteem, sadly, there are exceptions to this expectation. We are here to vote on a resolution to remove Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene from her committee assignments due to conduct that is contrary to our House rules and the inaction of Republicans. I am confused as to how long should we expect to wait for Republicans to take action on something so deplorable. To quote Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, "Loony lies and conspiracy theories are a cancer." I would go farther than that. They are dangerous and a threat to our domestic security. Anyone who conducts themselves in such a manner should not be legitimized by holding a platform on committees of national importance. Let me be clear. Anyone who tarnishes the memory of the children who died at Sandy Hook by saying the massacre was staged is not fit to serve on any House committee. Anyone who chases a child, a survivor of the Parkland shooting for the mean-spirited purpose of harassing, intimidating, and belittling a child by shouting at them in public and calling them cowards while videotaping the exchange does not deserve to craft policy on the committee that determines how to educate and keep our children safe. Think about that. Regrettably, the trauma caused by this mass shooting, a horrific event, led to the unfortunate suicide of 2 survivors. Colleagues, I am a proud Californian, and I take issue with anyone who disrespects Californian lives lost by promoting hate against our Jewish friends and neighbors, claiming that the wildfires were started by Jewish space lasers. does not deserve to serve on a committee that sets our national funding levels. Anyone who questioned the 9/11 attack, endorsed executions against our colleagues, referred to the midterms as Islamic invasion, simply put, is a danger to this institution and our personal safety. Bigoted conspiracy theories are what incited a mob of domestic terrorists to storm the Capitol. And as a result of the attack, the United States Capitol has changed. Blue lives have been lost. One murdered at the hands of the angry mob. Posting this sign on your door is not justice. It's an embarrassment. This building is a historical place, a national treasure, where my constituents used to easily visit. Now it requires militarized security. And still, when I walk the halls, I do not feel safe. Words have consequences. We're going through a time of tragedy. More Americans have died from the coronavirus than during World War II. We need to come together. It is time to hold members that sow bigoted theories that have caused bloodshed and that are meant to divide us accountable for their words and actions. We must hold members of Congress to a standard that reflects the historical dignity of this body. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Mr. Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me just associate myself with the remarks of our ranking member, Mr. Cole, the sage of Oklahoma. I think he said things quite well and quite succinctly. I will say for the record, I don't support the comments that are attributed to our colleague from Georgia. Indeed, in full disclosure, I supported and worked for someone else in that primary. At the same time, I'm like Ms. Walorski, I don't quite understand the referral to the Ethics Committee, but perhaps that will be further explained as the hearing goes on. But in the interest of time, I'm going to yield back.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Mr. Raskin right now.
Mr. Chairman, could I pass for the moment and come back to me? I'm just completing one other thing.
Is Mr. Perlmutter? No, okay, let me go to Mr. Rushenthaler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. I'd like to echo the sentiment of Ranking Member Cole. I would like to just draw attention to the fact that we do need to look at the precedent setting for a statute of limitation. To my knowledge, when we've done this in the past, it's been for comments that have been made while the member was in office. I just think I'm not advocating one way or the other. I'm just saying that the question needs to be asked, are we going to adopt the statute of limitations? And if we are, how far back that statute of limitation it goes back. Additionally, that would lead to the question of when does the Ethics Committee have jurisdiction? So for example, if comments are made in that statute of limitations period, whenever it is, when that person is a candidate, do they then get vetted by the Ethics Committee? These are just questions I am posing. Because if we are going to go down this route, the precedent is set, which would require a statute of limitation. With that, I yield back. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman very much. I just want to again point out that the gentlewoman from Georgia has doubled down on her comments. She's been quite, as a member of Congress, and you can check her Twitter account out to validate that. I'm now yielding to Ms. Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, listening to our witnesses and the members of this committee, all I can think about is what a terribly sad day this is for our country and for Congress. But we don't have a choice but to deal with this. Historically, the parties have policed themselves. Even as recently as a couple years ago, our Republican colleagues removed a member from committees after he made a series of false and despicable statements. But that was the old GOP. Now, when a member of the House Republican caucus advocates for insurrection, violence against elected officials and children, or promotes fringe conspiracy theories, apparently the Republican Party embraces that member and assigns her to committees where her unhinged beliefs can do the most harm. For apparently the party of limited government and fiscal responsibility, free markets, and peace through strength has become the party of conspiracy theories and QAnon. And that's not my assessment. That's a direct quote from Republican Senator John Thune of South Dakota. A Republican Party that endorses the violence and conspiracy theories espoused by the representative from Georgia is not our parents' Republican Party. It's not Ronald Reagan's GOP or the Bush's GOP. And if today's House Republican caucus wants to embrace this behavior, the majority does not. We cannot, because as the bill before us states, this member's behavior does not reflect credibly upon the House. Representative Green's extensive, detailed, and public history of making dangerous and downright outrageous comments cannot go unaddressed. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle know this. And by refusing to hold a member of their own party accountable, they force us to take the unprecedented but necessary action to stop the spread of conspiracy theories, lies, and hate in Congress. Representative Green apparently stands for the Republican Party that likes to own the libs on Twitter and fire up the base with misinformation and outright lies, particularly the big lie promoted by the ex-president that his loss of the presidential election was tied to fraud, a blatantly untrue allegation that, when repeated often enough and loudly enough, incited the violent attack on a joint session of Congress in this building 1 month ago today. But that's how we got here to where we are today. Years of angry, vengeful, alt-right pundits sowing racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and lies about America. So now they've infected the grand old party, and now Republican leadership is doing nothing to separate themselves or their constituents from these conspiracy theories that thrive amidst the hatred. No matter how much our colleagues today say that they disapprove of the representative's conduct, they must realize she's now the face of their party. The woman who supported the armed insurrection of the Capitol, which has taken the lives of 6 people, including 3 police officers, has more influence on her party than our colleagues here do today. Think about this. If Marjorie Taylor Greene was in any other job, she could not avoid serious disciplinary action. With her history of advocating for violence against her colleagues, challenging police officers, and refusing to abide by law enforcement rules put in place for the security of everyone who works in this building, and advocating for lies which undermine the job we're all entrusted to do here for the American people. So this conduct would not be tolerated in any other workplace in America, and the Capitol should be no different. This isn't canceling the voice of the representative from Georgia. It's about accountability. As one of our colleagues has mentioned, there is no right to committee assignments. But if a member conducts themselves in so disgraceful a way that she brings discredit upon Congress and her own party is incapable of addressing the problem, then the House as a whole has to do it. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fishbach.
And Mr. Chair, I appreciate the opportunity. And, as one of the freshman members and new to Congress, it really does seem to me that this would be setting a new precedent and one that I think could be very dangerous. It's a precedent where the majority party can punish a member of the minority party by removing them from their committee assignments. And I really don't believe that this precedent is in the best interest of the body. But I appreciate the opportunity to take just a minute. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Perlmutter, are you ready? Or Mr. Raskin, who's?
Yes, I'm delighted to go, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
With your permission, Mr. Chairman, I just want to speak in very strong favor of this resolution. I was hoping when I first saw it that this would be an opportunity for real bipartisanship on the part of the Rules Committee, and we love our colleagues on both sides of the aisle in the committee, and I thought that we could model for the whole House our determination to stand against this kind of militant and deranged extremism, which has become such a threat to American democracy. I was delighted to see the remarks by the Senate Republican leader, Mr. McConnell, who said, and I'm going to quote, "Loony lies and conspiracy theories are cancer for the Republican Party and our country." Somebody who suggested that perhaps no airplane hit the Pentagon on 9/11, that horrifying school shootings were pre-staged, and that the Clintons crashed John F. Kennedy Jr.'s airplane is not living in reality. This has nothing to do with the challenges facing American families or the robust debates on substance that can strengthen our party. I've been reading Sid Blumenthal's wonderful multi-volume biography of Abraham Lincoln, which I recommend to my colleagues because it's about Lincoln as a politician and how he always tried to put moral criteria at the center of political controversy. So he would be anchored in a moral analysis. And when he founded the GOP, it wasn't called the GOP then, but when he founded the Republican Party, he was taking on the know-nothings, and he hated their racism, and he hated their conspiracy theories, and he hated their anti-immigrant feeling, which was directed then at the Irish and at the Germans. That was the foundation of the Republican Party, one of our great Republican parties. And I would take no delight in seeing the Republican Party destroyed, but it is being destroyed by these fanatical conspiracy theories and by the racism and by the anti-Semitism that has been unleashed by this kind of thinking. And so, if our friends in the Republican Party won't take a strong stand against it, then we in the House of Representatives must take a strong stand against it. And I favor this resolution, and I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Hey, thank you very much. And let me just say again, as I said in the beginning, I hope that when this comes to a vote, that it's a bipartisan vote. Because I think that would be a strong unifying message to this country. And, I've heard a lot about precedent. I mean, the new precedent here is that a member of this House is calling for assassinations. That's the new precedent. And as I said, if that's the standard, that we move people from committees, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. Mr. Perlmutter.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I came in late. I did hear Ms. Fishbach and some of Ms. Walorski's comments. This gives me no pleasure, and I agree with Ms. Fishbach. This is the precedent. I don't like this precedent. But as the chairman has said, the language Ms. Green has used, the universe that she lives in, denying the school shootings and lasers from outer space, starting the fires. I don't think we have any alternative. I certainly had wished that Mr. McCarthy and the caucus, the Republican caucus, would have taken stronger steps than they have, and I don't think we have any other choice. And I appreciate the comments of the witnesses and the other members and concerns shared by Mr. Cole and Ms. Fishbach, but this thing goes beyond the pale, and it does discredit to the House of Representatives if we don't do something. So with that, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Morelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. I got kicked off, so I'm certainly probably going to repeat what other members have said. I think the distinguished ranking member said there must be a different and better way. And I actually don't disagree. I think there was and there is a different and better way. The different and better way would be for the minority leader to exercise the leadership that he is entrusted with to make certain that members of his caucus serve in appropriate positions. And the decision that he made and the steering and policy members in the Republican caucus made was to put Marjorie Taylor Greene on the Educational Labor Committee. And to the point others have made, you did that with full knowledge of all the things that she has said leading up to her time in Congress and since her time in Congress. You had that as material that went into the decision you made on which committees this individual would serve on. And so was there a different and better way? Absolutely. And in the ensuing days, since it's been highlighted more and more of what this member's conduct has been, there have been ample opportunities during the ensuing days to make good on this, do the right thing. What's the old saw? There's never there's always, yeah, that's all I asked for it and I can't even repeat it. Never a bad time to do the right thing, I think is the way it says. So over the last several days, you could have done the right thing. You could have stepped up. And I think the minority leader has to take on the responsibility for what I think is a tragic, misguided decision. Could undo it. You could undo it today. You could undo it before the House acts. So this is a simple one. And frankly, this really is a question of right and wrong. I wasn't at the Pentagon on 9/11. I was in New York City. I watched those buildings burn and come down, where thousands of Americans lost their lives. And Ms. Taylor Greene has indicated that she questions whether or not anyone actually saw the plane hit the Pentagon. I wasn't there. I'll assume that the thousands of witnesses and people in the building speak for it. But, you know, as others have said, you could continue to talk about this. The other thing that I find striking about this is it would be one thing if, having said or done some of these things in the past, the member demonstrated some remorse. That, and I understand from press reports, there have been numerous attempts by colleagues, probably on both sides, but certainly on the Republican side, to have her come out and say publicly, I apologize. They were intemperate remarks, they were ill-informed, whatever it is you want to say. But she has not only doubled down, triple down, quadruple down, she has boasted of raising $1.6 million off of her comments in the last several days, as though this is some kind of joke or this is some kind of way to raise campaign funds. I mean, how cynical have we gotten? How just completely lacking in any morals would someone suggest that all of their comments to date should not only not be apologized for, but should be used as an effort to raise campaign dollars? I find it hard to imagine. Yes, these are unprecedented actions we may be taking. These are certainly unprecedented times, and she is certainly an unprecedented type of member. And in fact, I think has said publicly in tweets that if we do this, the Republican majority in 2 years will use this extensively to hurt Democratic members. I'm paraphrasing, but essentially that's it. And apparently now she speaks for the entire Republican caucus, not just for herself, but she's now going to say what they will do to us. I find this all incredibly, incredibly disturbing. And I came out of an institution and now I am part of another institution that values very much its history, its precedents, that values decorum, that values people having respect for one another, even when they disagree. But there's no room for that with this member, as far as I can tell. And to continue to double down, to continue to suggest that not only does she not regret her comments, but every indication that going forward, she continues to, and I'm sure probably will, use the same type of language, continue to engage in conspiracy theories. And I must say, probably the person that sold me most on voting yes today is probably Mitch McConnell. Because frankly, I don't know that I would say Senator McConnell has been a beacon over the last several years. For him to have reached a point to make the comments that he has made, I think says volumes about where we are and the actions we take. So do I wish, to my good friend, there was a different and better way? There have been. You chose not to take advantage of them. You should have. And I think everyone should be embarrassed by the comments that this member has made in the past and has continued to make. And so with that, Mr. Chair, I'll yield back and I will
Thank you.
strongly support this rule and I will strongly support the resolution on the
Thank
floor.
you. Mr. Desagne. You have to unmute. Yeah. Okay, okay. We can't hear you for some reason. We'll come back to you. We'll go to Ms. Ross, then we'll come back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think it's unfortunate that we are in this position today. I think it's unfortunate that the Rules Committee is having to deal with this, though I do appreciate the chairman pointing out on multiple occasions that this at least gives an opportunity for a committee hearing when there doesn't appear to be another appropriate committee for this. I'm looking at this as precedent over only a 1 month period of time. So I think many people, particularly those in the Republican Party, have known about Ms. Green's remarks. They knew about it because of her primary. But the question is, as a member, what has she done since she's come here in light of those remarks and in light of the insurrection that we had, and how has the Republican conference responded to that? And we all know, and these are just facts, that committee appointments were made much later by the Republican conference, and that's one reason why this committee has had so much action over the last couple of weeks. And those appointments were made after the insurrection, with full knowledge of Congresswoman Green's previous comments, with full knowledge of how she's comported herself here, with full knowledge of her involvement in the insurrection. And despite all that knowledge, as Mr. Morelli has put forward and done so really very convincingly, she was appointed to the Education and Labor Committee with all of that knowledge. That is a dereliction of duty. That is ignoring the facts and the implications. And in fact, that is giving her yet another platform to not just hurt people with her words, but encourage other people to hurt people with their actions. And I think Congressman Deutsch's testimony was so powerful about the families of children who are being further terrorized. But the conference gave her that platform. That was an error. Then Minority Leader McCarthy was given another opportunity to say, you know, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. Even with members of his own party saying, you know, we just don't want to deal with this. This is inappropriate and it is wrong. But no, he did not take the opportunity to do the right thing. And that leaves us. It leaves us on this Rules Committee, and it leaves us in Congress to have to do what we shouldn't have to do. It should be up to the Republican Conference to police its members, to do the right thing. And if you do not agree with the way somebody is inciting violence and putting forth blatantly false information, why would you give them a further platform? We have an obligation to do this for the good of the country and for the good of this Congress. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll try Mr. Desagne, see whether we get him this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
So I can sense around. Okay, good.
Thank you. Let me just briefly say, I'd like to associate myself with the comments of my friend from Florida, the chairman of the Ethics Committee, Mr. Deutsch, as a member of the Education Committee, and just how implausible and remarkable the thought of having someone who's used this language be on that committee. And then secondarily, just if ever there were a time that we would be aware of the importance of words and their impact, seems like it's a short memory. It wasn't very long ago. So words matter. Words matter for any elected official. And I'm reminded of the period when Oliver Wendell Holmes and Justice Brandeis were debating First Amendment or free speech, First Amendment rights, when they said that you don't have a right to stand up in the middle of a crowded theater and scream fire. So too is the case here. You don't have a right as a member of Congress to weaponize this kind of language. We've seen the clear and present danger when people do this. And in an era of social media, and unfortunately too many elected officials thinking attention is what they're here for, we have to, at least, as the chairman said, take this action. And as others have said, I'm not the least bit happy that we have to be here, but I'm also not the least bit doubting in the validity of the actions that are proposed here today. And I would urge my colleagues to vote for this resolution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. I think everybody's asked questions, but I want to give Ms. Walorski and Mr. Deutsch the final word because you've heard a lot here. So I want to make sure if there's anything that anybody missed or any last points you want to make. If you give you the opportunity, I know you have to go to another meeting, but once you can go, Ms. Walorski, I'll begin with you, then with Mr. Deutsch.
Thanks again, Mr. Chairman. I just want to tell all of my colleagues that are on this call, and I thank them for being on this call. I just want to reemphasize that I really believe that taking this step, it does weaponize the Ethics Committee. And I think it's a tragedy that that's exactly what's going to happen. You know, there's comments from a lot of members. You know, we've made decisions in the Ethics Committee before that we're not looking prior to folks being in Congress. And I think that we're walking down this unprecedented path. And I just want to say it with a warning and with a disappointment that we have a phenomenal committee that's really modeled what committees should be when it comes to being bipartisan and working these things out in the committee process. And I think that we are weaponizing a committee that we'll regret. And I think it's sad, and I just think it's wrong. But I am grateful for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman, to be here as a witness. And thank you to all my colleagues for your opinions as well. And I yield back.
Mr. Deutsch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I first want to just also submit for the record a letter from Stand with Parkland, the National Association of Families for Safe Schools, founded by the families of the victims in the Parkland High School massacre, who wrote respectfully requesting that, wrote to Leader McCarthy respectfully requesting that Representative Green be removed from the Education and Labor Committee. I wanted, Mr. Chairman, just to quickly make clear once again, it's been a long hearing, but the Constitution clearly provides with the House, vests with the House, the independent authority, independent of the Ethics Committee, to discipline any of its members where the appropriate sanction may include the limitation of any right, power, privilege, or immunity of that member. We are well within our rights to do this. I would like to again address the issue of precedent. Mr. Chairman, you said this eloquently, and I just couldn't agree more. The precedent that we should be concerned with is the precedent of not allowing members who traffic in anti-Semitism and racism and Islamophobia and violent threats against public officials to have the benefit of sitting on a committee in the House of Representatives. The precedent that members of Congress cannot trade in conspiracy theories without consequences, and the precedent that members should not and cannot attack and harass private citizens, let alone survivors of gun violence, without consequences. Mr. Chairman, we've not had a chance to talk about, but I would just refer back to just last Congress when the House passed almost unanimously a resolution that condemned QAnon and the conspiracy theories that it promotes. That resolution conveyed the sense of the House of Representatives, of which we are all a part, that conspiracy theories like those promoted by QAnon encourage the rejection of objective reality, deepen our nation's political polarization and undermine trust in America's democratic institutions. We cannot afford to allow that trust to be undermined anymore. I say this, we talk about our colleagues. I do view Ranking Member Wolarski as a friend. I am sorry that this is the first opportunity that we have to work together in this capacity. And I mean this not as an attack against her, but merely as a defense of the people that I represent and so many around the country, when I tell you that I know for a fact, with absolute certitude, that when we use a word like tragedy to talk about the decision to simply make sure that there is accountability here, that for the families in Parkland and the families in Sandy Hook and the families in Las Vegas who know that this is a person who has questioned whether these mass shootings even existed, they know what tragedy is. They've experienced tragedy. They live it every single day. We have to act today, Mr. Chairman. I hope we do it in a bipartisan way today. And again, on Thursday, my colleagues all seem in agreement that what's been said is unacceptable. So then we need to take this action because it is the only opportunity that we have to do so. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you. And I thank the committee for being so thoughtful and deliberative throughout this entire process.
Well, I thank you both for being here. Let me just wait. Does any other committee wish to ask a question? Seeing none, let me just close by saying I want to thank you both for being here. I have enormous respect for both of you. But I think what's frustrating to me about this hearing, Mr. Deutsch just referenced it, is that some of my friends on the Republican side began by saying we are in agreement, that we're appalled by these statements. And then it's followed by a but the process, well, first of all, as we've said over and over and over again, the history of removing people from committees doesn't go by way of the Ethics Committee, number one. Number two, we're not weaponizing the Ethics Committee. The Ethics Committee is not even constituted. The Republicans haven't even put their members on the Ethics Committee. But I would just say this, I really hope that the leadership on the Republican side gives members the freedom to vote their conscience on this. Because this is not about process. This is about who we are. This is about this institution. This is about decency. I mean, we are dealing with somebody who has said things that go beyond the pale. I mean, talking about assassinating members of Congress, among other things. So this is a whole different place we're in. And to be just very candid here, this is not a surprise. Leader McCarthy has been told that this would be coming unless he acted. It's February 3rd. We've waited long enough. And I think we are proceeding in a way that, quite frankly, affords more of a process than if this were brought to the floor under a privileged resolution. So again, we all regret we are in this moment, but here we are. And I think the question is, are we going to do anything or not? And I hope that in a bipartisan way, the answer is yes. So I thank you both, and you are now excused. I want to welcome our next witness, the gentlewoman from Florida, Representative Wasserman Schultz, who is the author of this legislation. I want to thank her for providing testimony today. Any written materials you submit to documents at mail.house.gov before the conclusion of this hearing will, without objection, be entered into the record. I now recognize the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Wasserman Schultz.
Thank you, Chairman McGovern, Ranking Member Cole, and members of the Rules Committee. I truly wish I was not sitting here today to present my resolution to remove Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene from her committee assignments. But I've listened to all of the testimony and the members' comments throughout the breadth of this hearing. And I have enough experience as a legislator to know that when you don't have a leg to stand on, you argue process. I'll note for the record that there isn't any member on this committee on the other side of the aisle that has argued that Marjorie Taylor Greene shouldn't be removed from her committees. You have not at all addressed the issue of whether we should remove her from her committee. You have only argued process. Unprecedented action by a member of Congress, which this certainly is, necessitates an unprecedented response. It doesn't have to be this way, as has been noted throughout this hearing. The minority leader has the opportunity to take action himself. In fact, the members of the Republican conference could have enough strength to urge your steering and policy committee to take action, but you have not. In the face of a global pandemic and in the wake of a devastating attack on our capital and our democracy, we're facing another unprecedented and divisive moment which threatens this nation. And I want to look at the facts. I know they've been gone over, but I think it's important for us to review them clearly. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene has advocated for execution of leadership of this House, of a former president of the United States and other political adversaries. She's encouraged violence against law enforcement, an utterance no member can condone or continue to stand by. We paid tribute to a slain Capitol Police officer this morning, and just yesterday, 2 FBI agents were tragically murdered in the course of their duties in my own congressional district. Not satisfied with engaging in sedition, she has a well-documented record of making repeated racist, anti-Semitic, and Islamophobic comments. She has spread baseless and cruel conspiracy theories, even claiming, as has been noted, that the horrific shootings at Sandy Hook Elementary and Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School were staged. She has personally, herself, stalked and verbally assaulted a young survivor of one of those tragedies and called him a coward as he was preparing to visit this Capitol to plead for legislation. He was 18 years old at the time. Her bizarre claims include blaming the 2018 Camp Fire wildfire in California on a Jewish space laser and dabbling in 9/11 trutherism. Congresswoman Greene's dangerous commentary continues to endanger, threaten, and inflict pain on a gamut of vulnerable communities. And that includes the colleagues and staff of the very House she serves in, who were just attacked last month by, among other Trump loyalists, the QAnon adherents she associated with. Confronted with her statements and actions in recent weeks, as a sitting member of this body, since she joined the Congress, Congresswoman Greene has expressed no remorse. None. Worse, she now stands by nearly all of these statements, saying just today, we know who they all are. We owe them no apologies. We will never back down. She remains a clear and present danger to our democracy. Congresswoman Greene's support for violence, pattern of stalking and intimidation, continued and unending pattern of appalling viciousness, lies, and racism, both before and after her election, is what helps fuel domestic terrorism, like we have all just witnessed up close. Her statements and actions bring shame on the entire House of Representatives and have fomented divisions within Congress and the United States as a whole. I filed this resolution to remove Congresswoman Taylor Greene from her committee assignments, both on the House Education and Labor and the House Budget Committees. This has become necessary because the House of Representatives is a collegial body, one in which we succeed when we can work together to solve problems, even when we disagree. This is not about whether we find Marjorie Taylor Greene's speech offensive. The point here is that she has promoted and advocated violence. She has herself stalked and intimidated those with whom she disagrees. In short, she is harmful to others and harmful to the House of Representatives in our ability to function normally. We need our elected leaders to rise to the immense challenges we face as a nation at a time when we must solve them with facts, ethical behavior, and respect. Lies, bigotry, and conspiracy theories cannot be sanctioned, instead of peddled in these hallowed halls. Based on her actions and statements and her belligerent refusal to disavow them, she should not be permitted to participate in the important work of House committees, reducing the future harm and disgrace she can cause in Congress and to the people of this nation by denying her a seat at committee tables where fact-based policies will be debated and crafted is both a suitable punishment and a necessary and proper restraint of her influence. The minority party should protect our ability to do the people's work and to take a stand against what we all agree is harmful and brings shame on the House. But if they refuse, the House as a whole must step in. Facts, evidence, and moral, thoughtful arguments will lead to the valuable truths that make this nation stronger. Lies, hate-filled conspiracy theories, and disinformation like those that Congresswoman Greene propagates will always breed disorder. Marjorie Taylor Greene chose her destructive path. She chose to deliberately lie and to foment violence. And once elected, she chose to stand by those words and actions. And today, she doubled down. Now that she's made those choices, The House must choose to limit the harm she can cause going forward in this body. We can take an important step toward restoring integrity and truth in this House by removing Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene from her committee assignments. While it is an action that we do not take lightly, it is the necessary course of action in the face of her extraordinary behavior, unbecoming of a member of Congress. Thank you for the opportunity to present to the Rules Committee.
Well, first of all, Ms. Wasserman-Schultz, I want to thank you for your testimony and for your leadership on this issue. I have made my views on this matter pretty clear. I will withhold any further comment at the moment. But let me ask my Republican colleagues, any questions on the Republican side? Mr. Russia?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. No comments. I would just say this. There has been talk about process and Republicans bringing up process. This committee is a process committee. Process is actually important because process is how we protect the integrity of the institution. I've already brought up a statute of limitations issue, which frankly needs to be addressed if we go down that route. Again, I'm not saying one way or the other how we proceed, but if we do proceed, we do need to address a statute of limitations argument, jurisdiction issues with ethics committee, whether or not there's issues with incoming candidates. And further, we also have to keep in mind that this will set an issue where the majority is telling the minority who sits on committees. You can argue if that is presidential or not, but there will come a time where the gavel will change. So process is important because it protects the sanctity of the institution and stabilizes the institution as we change from party to party. With that said, I'll yield back.
No, I thank the gentleman for his comments. And yes, this is a Rules Committee deals with a lot of process. And I think that what we're doing here today is actually giving more process to this issue than it would receive if it was a privileged resolution. The statute of limitations thing, I don't get because as I pointed out earlier, Ms. Taylor Greene has doubled down and made it clear that she won't, that she has nothing to apologize for, period. So I think she has associated herself with those comments. But let me just say this. If there's a change in who's in charge here, I hope there's not, but if there is, and if there's a member of this body, Democrat or Republican, who advocates for the assassination of other members, you know what? I'll vote to expel, I will vote to get that person off of committees. As I said before, I personally believe that the gentleman from Georgia should resign or be expelled from this place. But at a minimum, she ought not to be on the committees. And so if that's the standard that we're setting here, if that's the precedent, that if people are calling for the assassination of other members of this body, and if that's a disqualifier for serving a committee, I'm all for it. I'm fine with it. And I can live with that. And I think it's and boy, that shouldn't even be controversial. I mean, does anybody on the Democratic side have any questions? I think I want to thank Ms. Wasserman-Schultz for her testimony, and I will see her on the House floor tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you, members.
I now want to welcome our next panel, Representative Brian Babin of Texas. I want to thank you for submitting your testimony, providing testimony today. Any written materials you submit to the rules documents at mail.house.gov before the conclusion of this hearing will, without objection, be entered into the record. I now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Babin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it very much, this opportunity.
Yep.
Let me begin by telling the people watching at home a little bit about this Rules Committee and what's going on here today. House Republicans have 211 members, 48.5% of the 435 seats in this August body. But on this committee, which decides what bills will come to the floor and what amendments will come up for a vote, we have only 4 members to the majority's 9. So the outcome of my amendment has already been decided and was never in doubt. It seems to be a show trial, plain and simple. It's also an open secret that this committee works at the direction of the Speaker of the House. That's an important distinction. She is not just the Speaker of the Democratic Caucus. To the committee, I say this: the action that you are preparing to take will shatter our institutional norms and precedent And there is certainly even concern on your side that what goes around will come around the next time that you are in the minority. I think the best thing any of you could do is to make a motion to adjourn this hearing right now and to get back to something that actually matters. But that won't happen, I'm aware. But if you're going to take this action and declare that each party is no longer responsible for keeping their own house in order, and that it falls upon the entire body to tend to this matter, you should lead by example. I'm not here to speak on Mrs. Green's behalf. She deserves and will continue to do so for her constituents, our Republican conference, and to the American people. But I will say that this is her first month on the job. She deserves the opportunity to do her duties, to let her employers, her constituents that is, decide next year whether to hire her again. Clause 1 of Rule 23 of the Rules of the House of Representatives provides a member, delegate, resident commissioner, officer, or employee of the House shall behave at all times in a manner that shall reflect credibly on the House. This provision was also cited specifically in House Resolution 72. Representative Green was not a member of the House when she said many, if not all, of the statements that led to this course of action. However, Representative Omar has been sworn in for 3 months when she said that the Council on Islamic American Relations was founded after 9/11 because they recognized that some people did something, unquote. There are two glaring errors here. First, CARE was founded in 1994. Secondly, on 9/11 wasn't just something that some people did something. It was the brutal murder of nearly 3,000 Americans by 19 radical Islamic terrorists. And this very Capitol may have been the next target had 4 of those terrorists not been thwarted by the heroes of United Flight 93. Unfortunately, I could go on with the near constant litany of wildly offensive, anti-Semitic, America is a bad guy rhetoric that Representative Omar has espoused both before and during her time in Congress. The majority is seeking to hold Representative Green to the standards of the House rules for her conduct and words while she was a private citizen. But they have said nothing and will do nothing about Representative Omar's conduct and words while she's been in office. I don't doubt that many of you believe that you are defending this institution with this vote. But now if you can prove it by going off the script this hearing is supposed to follow by voting your conscience to make my amendment in order, please take off your partisan blinders, hold your colleague to account for the shameful conduct she has exhibited while wearing one of these pins, and then maybe we can talk about Mrs. Green. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will yield back.
So I thank the gentleman for his testimony. He is right. This is the Rules Committee, and the gentleman's been around since what he got. He got elected, came here in 2015. If I'm
I did. I came in 2015.
Right, and so the gentleman knows that the Rules Committee has to follow the rules. The gentleman provided an amendment to the Rules Committee that I'm sure his staff must have checked with the parliamentarian, is not germane. So we don't normally make non-germane amendments in order. We never do. So I point that out for the record. Secondly, and you know, I don't really know the gentleman, but I would just say it is clear that we don't share the same values, and it is really amazing to me that you would come before this committee and present what you just presented, and not at all be bothered by a single thing that Ms. Taylor Greene has said, including advocating for the assassination of members of this Congress. But you are always welcome here, even though I strongly disagree with what you were saying here. Let me ask on the Republican side, is there any questions of Mr. Babin?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. I would just like to thank my colleague, the good doctor from Texas, for coming to the committee and to see if he would have anything to add.
Thank you very much, Guy. Appreciate you. Mr. Chairman, I would say that we probably do share our values. However, you can't wear blinders and see one side of the table and not see the other side, because that is not the only quote that Mrs. Omar has made in her time and her tenure in Congress. I've got a list here that I could go down. There are 11 quotes, 11 instances where she has made anti-Semitic tropes, and I don't recall ever seeing the Rules Committee institute a proceeding against her. We haven't even seen anything said against her by the Speaker of the House. She has retracted partially some of these, but others she has doubled down on. And I could read these if you will indulge me.
Mr. Rushenthaler has the time. If he wants to indulge you, he can. I would
just ask my colleague from Texas if we could just move on, if you don't mind, and we cannot go through I understand the point you're trying to make, but for the just sake of moving this along, I'd ask you to refrain if that is okay with you.
That's fine with me. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Babbitt.
Okay, you're welcome.
Anybody on the Democratic side have a question?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Torres.
perhaps you can explain or define what germane means, just to make sure that the general public who has been spoken to by our witness truly understand what we're talking about here.
So let me read from the rule. Germaneness, no motion or proposition on a subject different from that under consideration shall be admitted under color of amendment. I mean, that is the title. So this is not relevant. This is not germane to the underlying bill. And again, the parliamentarian would have, I'm sure if you check with the parliamentarian would have told you that. But anyway, Ms. Torres, any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure that all of our members are fully informed of what all these terms are that are being thrown out. Yeah. I yield back.
Mr. Chair, if I might. Perlmutter.
Yep.
Dr. Babin is a friend of mine, and I am disappointed in his testimony today. And I think the thing that I'm concerned about, I'd say to my friend, is the Republican conference placed Ms. Green on the Labor and Education Committee, knowing full well that she doubts and has said that the shootings in Florida and in Connecticut, and I don't know where else, Las Vegas apparently, were all staged. But certainly at the schools in Florida and in Connecticut, that is, you've run an office. I was in leadership in my state legislature and the state Senate. Never would we pick anybody. I mean, I don't know that I've ever had anybody like that, but we certainly wouldn't put somebody like that on labor and education, period. And she has no business. I mean, just that alone sets up this whole thing. And I've heard your testimony, and you want to try to equate Rep. Omar with what's going on here. But this started by the selection of Ms. Green, who questions these shootings that we all know happened, to put her on labor and education. That is the whole point here, to my friend. And I don't, if you want to respond to that, feel free, but that's what's got me so upset, period.
Well, if I may respond, Mr. Chairman, I consider Ed Perlmutter a very, very good friend. Over the years that I've served with him on space and science, we have similar loves and likes, and we've traveled together. And I really appreciate that. And I appreciate what you're saying. And I'm not here to address the supposed statements by Mrs. Green. I have understood that she has retracted some of these statements. I am not versed up in them. And so I'm not here to talk about her. Okay. I'm here to make sure that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And when the chairman says that I don't have the same, he doesn't have the same values, or I don't have his same values, I can tell you that we probably most certainly have the same values, but we cannot pick and choose one side that may be the opponent's side and not look and see, just like it says in the Bible, if you have a speck in your eye, don't criticize someone for the speck in his eye if you've got a log in yours. And you have problems on your side as well that have not been addressed. And that is what this amendment is all about. So Ed, I would just tell you that I appreciate what you just said, and I understand the high feelings on both sides here. So with that, I'll just yield back.
Mr. Chairman, can I just jump in real fast?
Yeah, let's make sure the promoter is finished.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'd yield to Mr. Reschenthaler.
Thank you, Mr. Perlmutter. Mr. Perlmutter has said that Dr. Babin is his friend. Dr. Babin said that Mr. Perlmutter is his friend. I want to say for the record that I consider Mr. Perlmutter a friend, but he'd be a better friend if he invited me skiing at some point in his home state of Colorado. And with that, I would yield back.
Okay.
It's on the record. It's on the record, Ed.
You got it. I yield back to the chair.
Anyone else on the Democratic side looking for recognition? Let me just say, Mr. Bevan, the false equivalence that you have just presented to us, to me, is unbelievable. The controversial remarks that Ms. Omar has made, she's apologized for, and she's actually engaged Jewish leaders in her community and around the country. And you're not here picking, you are here picking and choosing, because what your amendment would do is exonerate Ms. Green. I mean, this is not an and, this is, you have exonerated her. I'm
not here to talk about her, Mr. Chairman.
This is what this hearing is about. I don't know if you got the notice, but that's what this hearing is about. And the bottom line is that, you have come with a resolution that essentially exonerates her. And so I look at, I mean, whatever. Appreciate your being here. I don't have anything else I want to add. Does anyone else have a question? Seeing none, I'd like to thank our witness for his testimony. You're now excused. Are there any other members who wish to testify on H.Res 72? Seeing none, this closes the hearing on H.Res 72. At this time, I'll entertain a motion from the gentlewoman from California, Mrs. Torres.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee grant H.Res 72, removing a certain member from certain standing committees of the House of Representatives, a closed rule. The rule provides 1 hour of debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Ethics. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the resolution. The rule provides that the resolution shall be considered as read. I yield back.
Thank you. You've heard the motion from the gentleman from California. Is there any amendment or discussion? Before we vote, let me just say one final thing. As I said before, none of us are happy about gathering and having this hearing and then having to report this resolution out to the floor. We had hoped that the Republican leadership would have dealt with this. For whatever reason, they don't want to deal with it. And that's unfortunate. And so we are taking this step. We have a process in place that is more of a process than it would normally be. And we will bring this to the floor, we will debate it, and we will vote on it. But again, I'm going to say, as I said before, the question we all have to ask ourselves is, what is the message? What is the consequence of doing nothing? And, when we've heard, again, all my Republican colleagues talk about how they don't want to associate themselves with the remarks of Ms. Taylor Green. I appreciate that. But it's not enough to just distance yourself from her remarks. Given the gravity and the seriousness of what she has said, the real question is, what action will you take? What we're doing here today is saying she should not enjoy the privilege of serving on committees. That's what this is about. Anybody who advocates assassinations of members of Congress, or anybody who said what she has said about a whole range of things that we've heard them here today, I don't believe should enjoy the privilege of being on a committee. And so now the vote is, is there any other discussion or amendment? Hearing none, the question is now on the motion offered by the gentlewoman from California. All those in favor will say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Accordingly, I will manage this for the majority. Mr. Rushdall, who?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's going to be Mr. Cole managing for us.
And Mr. Cole will manage it for the minority. I thank everybody for being here today. And without objection, the committee is adjourned.